Welcome to Wi-Fi Training IoT Lessons. So, what we are going to cover in this is primarily IoT technologies, but let's look at what happened in the past few decades. So, in 1980s, where the computers came, one particular vendor, like dictate that decade, pretty much it is IBM, so who developed the mainframe computers. So once that decade is gone, the next decade, another thing actually predominant in the market where the software became the leading technology that changed the way we work. So in that competition, Microsoft pretty much took the lead in the way, so they pretty much dictate the next decade. So but every decade you will realize the new technologies will come and dominate the market. So when it is 2000, it was the World Wide Web. So in the World Wide Web, Google came and picked the market. They lead the way. Everything what we do, like commercializing, they make sure everyone use their browsers to go to World Wide Web. But in 2010, another technology came, pretty much you can guess. Yes, it is mobile technologies. So mobile take over the market. So then people using mobile phones, they didn't really use World Wide Web. They use the application. So the mobile industry that changed the world. So smartphone, pretty much Apple, who won the game in that particular decade, they lead the way, but other vendors followed as well. So now when it comes to 2020, we would expect another technology dominating the market. So if you look for the predictions, most of you will agree it will be Internet of Things. That's what everybody predicting. So this will change the way. This will be the innovating technology that will change the way we work. But in that space, still it is too early to say who will be dominating next 10 years. But one of the IoT vendors will capitalize most of these marketing opportunities. So that's the one reason why we developed this micro course on IoT technologies, to give you an understanding what we are using in this particular Internet of Things space. But before going to the detail, let's have a look what are the prediction for the IoT connected device. So if you look at last decade, pretty much IoT was there in the last 10 years, but it was not expanded dramatically. But what we expecting in next few years, it will be dominating the devices internet market, where the most of the devices connected to internet would be IoT going from 2021 onward. As you can see, this is one IoT analytics predictions. What they're saying is around 40 million devices, but out of that 75% will be IoT devices. So this would be the agenda of this micro course. This is how we basically arranging it. It will be a 5 module. Initially we will talk about the IoT landscape. If you look at this diagram, pretty much IoT can be any of these technologies, starting with body area network and personal area network and local area network and even wide area network. It can be. So in the body area network, we will be those technologies, near field communication, sensing devices, we would expect to go up to 1 meter arm's length distance. So we will be measure, pretty much it's a wearable devices, where you will get some of those devices will measure your health, heart rate, blood circulation. Even by analyzing those data, it can give you some interesting analytics, and you can detecting even this diseases basically in advance detected, so then that you can get it cure before it in getting worse. So when it goes to the personal area networking, connected vehicles, connected homes, pretty much those two space, personal area networking and local area networking operating, technology like Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave, those sort of technologies operating in the connected home space. We will be discussing those. And when it comes to the wide area networking, certain technologies won't work in the longer distances. There are uh, specific IoT technologies came to address those demand, like smart cities, smart agriculture, smart mining, different industrial verticals, how to automate those sort of industries using automate and analyzing those input and make some smart decisions. So those are the core of this particular training, where we will be talking about those three technological area in the 3 module, and we will finish off with the some generic IoT deployment considerations. So what technologies we will going to be discussed? So I think this is a important summary of these technologies. Probably it's a two-way of categorizing. Like you need to know some technologies is achieving higher bandwidth, so those will be working with the short range. But when it comes to IoT, we don't really require that much of large bandwidth. So in that sense, IoT technology primarily focusing about low rate as well as low power, because when we're talking about those sensors, we don't want to them to replacing battery every year or every second year. So in that way, whenever we're deploying those sort of large scale sensors, we are anticipating 5 to 10 years of battery life. So in that way, most of the IoT technologies focusing on the low bandwidth, but distance wise, sometimes some technologies are available for large area distances. So if you take one example is Bluetooth. Bluetooth will be either body area network or personal area network that can act. So it will be in the 2.4 frequency band. That's another sort of IoT technologies that will be focusing on. So Wi-Fi, as you know, it is a predominant technology as of today. It is pretty much operating in 2.45 gigahertz, but going to 6 gigahertz as well. But it is to address large bandwidth demand, but the nature of Wi-Fi is it is power consumption is high. So smartphone, those sort of devices you expect to charge every day. That's the nature of Wi-Fi. Because of that, Wi-Fi as it is, you can't really deploy for IoT devices. But in Wi-Fi, there are technologies developed, even though it is come in the Wi-Fi umbrella, but the use case was keeping IoT in mind. So in that way, the 11AH, the sub 1 gig Wi-Fi amendment came to addressing the IoT marketing demands. So where I targeted to this low bandwidth, low power requirement. So we will be discussing that technology as well. Then there are few different technologies came. Primarily all of them have a common characteristics: file layer, physical layer, and MAC layer. All based on the IEEE 802.215.4. So all these technologies, they have their own application layers, but MAC and PHY is 15.4. So wireless HART, ISA 111A, Zigbee, Thread, 6LoWPAN. Some of the example we will go into the detail. There's another standard we call C wave or Z wave, which is operating in the sub 1 gigahertz frequency band, which is not PHY and MAC, not defined by IEEE, but it is another one commonly used in the smart home environment. So we'll be discussing that as well. So when it comes to the long ranges, there are technologies available. For example, cellular is available for high bandwidth applications. But again, like Wi-Fi, this is bandwidth, high bandwidth and high power consumption. So sometime as it is, it may not be suitable for IoT applications. There's another thing to understand in cellular technology. It is operate in the licensing spectrum. So because of that, you have to pay some amount of money. So it is expensive. So that is a one reason cellular as it is we don't use in IoT. But in the service provider environment, there's a technology named narrowband IoT, which is developed keeping these IoT use cases in mind. But in that sense, service provider will providing this service. So you have to subscribe for their NB IoT services. There will be a charge for that, but still it's a quite reliable service because they use the LTE band or whatever the 4G cellular band. They can give some deterministic uh, qualities, QoS. So sometimes if you really required that nature of requirement in your IoT application, probably NB-IoT will be a good fit. But mainly there are two protocols very common in this space. One is called LoRaWAN. So LoRaWAN is operating in the sub 1 gig frequency band, but again it is using low power and it's a low bandwidth application, so low bandwidth requirement. Because of that we can transmit longer duration, longer distances, not like Wi-Fi. So it's a one common one. Typically it can go up to 10 kilometers sort of range. Even line of sight in the free space it can go to hundreds of kilometers, but in a typical environment we use it for the 10 kilometers average distances use cases, where large agricultural environment, smart cities, mining environment, it's commonly used. So then other technology is called Sigfox. So this is also operating in the sub 1 gigahertz frequency band. This is also targeting very low data rate application. Because of that, battery life of these particular devices will be go to quite easily for 7-10 years long. So these are the technologies we will be covering in this particular micro course. As you can see, like we can break them into LPWAN. These three technologies we will be discussing. In the low rate wireless personal layer network, we will talking about all these technologies, and even wireless LANs area we will be go bit in detail to 11AH. So that's what we will be covering in this particular module. But before going to the lessons, let's quickly talk about Wi-Fi training. So we are Cisco authorized training partner as well as CWNP authorized training partners. So we will be developing content, our own content as well. As you can see, we have developed so many micro courses like this. If you are interested to learn wireless or security, troubleshooting, those sort of technologies, feel free to go to the Wi-Fi training website and go through the training materials available. So a little bit about myself, Rasika Nayanajith, Cisco instructor as well as CWNP authorized trainer. So my primary teaching area is wireless and routing and switching. But in this particular training course I developed some IoT technologies. You will see Wi-Fi and IoT going to be hand in hand kind of technologies, where some of these IoT technologies will be hosted in normal Wi-Fi access point. So in that way you don't want to have a separate gateway for all these different technology. Some of these will come as a convergence sort of area where you can IoT radios will be available in your Wi-Fi access point. So in that way I'm really interested to teach you about what I know in IoT. And let's begin the training.